Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new on my channel, then welcome. Today's video is kind of like a 101 on eyeshadow placement on the eye. Now I do have a kind of similar video up on my channel already. I'm talking about how to apply eyeshadow for hooded eyes, so I will link that on the screen for you guys as well, and I will also list it in the description box, so you can check that out if you haven't seen it. I know I filmed it ages ago, but I know that not much has changed since I filmed that video. I still use the same techniques, but in this one I tried to incorporate more tips and tricks for people who have different eye shapes than I do. So I really hope that it's useful to some of you guys. Also, this video is brought to you because my dear friend from YouTube, Emma, she suggested the video. If you enjoy this video, then you can thank her for the idea. But anyway, without further ado, if you want to see how to get this really basic look that you can see on my eyes, but just learn a bunch of techniques and tips and tricks on how to place eyeshadow on the eye to make it look as flattering as possible, then just keep on watching this video. Okay, so first things first, we want to prep the eyes, and that is really important. If you do not prep your eyes before you go in with any kind of eyeshadows, well, it really does depend on your eyelids, but most likely the eyeshadow will not look as pigmented. It will not stay in place for as long as you would like it to. You'll probably start creasing. All these things that none of us wants to happen to our eyeshadow can be avoided if you use eye primers. Now, I have already used some concealer on my eyelids, and that is absolutely fine. You can just use concealer if you want to and then go in with eyeshadows after that. But I want to apply some eye primer specifically before I go in with eyeshadows as well, because in my case I use the concealer to counteract the discoloration and the veins that I have on my eyelids, which are pretty prominent. So using concealer to cover up those kinds of issues on my eyes, make sure that the discoloration on my eyelids will not start tampering with the eyeshadows. But the reason why I'm going in with the eye primer as well is to get the colors looking even more vibrant than they would do otherwise. So that is the first step. I am using the NYX High Definition Eyeshadow Base. To be honest, I haven't really had too much experience with different kinds of eyeshadow primers. I've used the different Urban Decay potions as well, but to be honest, they were a bit too sticky for my liking, so I wasn't too blown away by them. But I don't know, I kind of like that this one, it doesn't make my eyes too sticky. It kind of dries down a bit, so yeah, I prefer this one. Next thing, you can set this down with a bit of powder as well if you want to. If you are a beginner with eyeshadow, I would recommend you doing that, just because if you don't set your eye primer down or your concealer, whatever you're using, it can be a bit sticky. It tends to be a bit sticky, so you will not have like an even base, which means that when you go in with maybe a bit too much eyeshadow, it can stick to certain places and it will be very difficult to blend it out afterwards. Now, the eyeshadow palette that I want to use for today's video is the Jaclyn Hill and Morphe palette, because it's one of my favorites. It's one of my all-time favorite palettes. There are so many shadows in here, so there is a very big variety of looks that you can do with this. Also, the shadows are really pigmented, but they are very buttery and creamy, so that they are very easy to blend out. So again, if you are just a beginner in makeup and you're looking for good palettes to start out with, then I'd say this is a very good palette to begin with, because you have your neutrals and you also have your pops of color and you have your smoky shadows, so you can do all these different kinds of things, just play around and enhance your makeup skills. So the first thing I'm going to do, as always, is set down a transition color. Now, the reason why a transition color is important is because it kind of softens up the eye a bit. It will make the blending so much easier for you afterwards when you go in with all these different kinds of shades, just because the colors will have something to blend into rather than just your own skin tone. So for instance, if you're going in with very dark colors like deep blues or greens or blacks and dark browns, it is very likely that it will create a very harsh contrast between your own skin tone and the colors that you have put down. So in order to make the transition a bit more softer from those darker shades to your own natural skin tone, you would use transition colors. I want to do a warm brown smoky eye, so I'm going to go in with the shade Silk Cream, which is a beautiful, as I already said, warm-toned beigey color. This is the Wet n Wild P20 brush. I love the Wet n Wild eye brush kit. I think it is amazing, especially for the amount that you pay for the brushes. I think the brushes are really, really good. So you want to start off with a very, very fluffy brush because you don't want to pack the color on your eyelid. You want to fluff it out, make it very, very nice and soft and diffused. So taking the fluffy brush, I'm going to start working in my crease. Hey guys, so I just realized that this is a bit confusing because I'm doing one thing but I'm saying something completely other. I keep using the word crease when I'm placing the color down, but in actuality I'm putting it more so in my eye socket rather than in my actual crease, and I'm going to get into that bit in a minute. I will explain it in more detail, why I'm not placing the color in my crease where my actual crease is, and why I'm placing the color higher than my crease. I hope it will make a bit more sense in a minute, but I just wanted to put it out there because I keep saying the word crease and then I'm telling you guys why I'm not putting it in my crease. So yeah, I hope that this bit kind of clears it up a bit and makes it a bit more understandable. And I'm really sorry that I wasn't explaining it all too well. But anyway, let's get back into the video, because that is normally the place where your own natural skin and the colors on your eyelid meet normally, but you have to be mindful of your own eye shape. For instance, I have hooded eyelids, which means that when I look up straight, most of my eyelid gets kind of shut off because of the hood that you can see over here. So that is why I take all of my transition colors and also my lid colors slightly higher than my natural crease. My crease is actually right over here because that is where the skin folds over, right? So when I look straight ahead, this is where my crease is, but I'm taking the color higher. So when I look straight, you can still see the color, because if I put that color in my actual crease, it would just fold and you wouldn't be able to see it when I open my eyes. So you have to be mindful of your own eye shape and just kind of play around and see what color placement looks best on your eye shape. It tends to be the case that if you have more eyelid space and your eyes are a bit bigger, you can place the colors according to your eye shape kind of naturally. You don't have to alter the color placement in any way, because when you have your eye open, everyone will be able to see what you have on your eyes anyway. If you have more like deep set eyes, which also means that it's kind of similar to the hooded eye shape in the sense that your eye is so much kind of in your eye socket that it's not very visible what you have going on the lid. In that case, you would use the technique that I'm using now, which is taking the colors a bit higher up so that you want to push this area a bit more backwards, and you want to bring forth the lid that is kind of hidden in the socket. So you would use a lot more light colors on the eyelid. Now, once we have the transition color down, I'm going to start deepening up the crease and the outer V to give my eye a bit more dimension. So I'm taking the shade Butter, which is slightly darker than the first shade that we put down, but it is very similar to the kind of color scheme. And as you start building the colors up, kind of going darker and darker and darker, that's what creates this nice diffusion between the shades and kind of this gradient look that we all want to achieve on our eyes, because it tends to be the most flattering. Now, I'm also taking a fluffy crease brush, but it is not as blown out as the Wet n Wild one was. This is way more kind of frayed. I don't know if this is the right word, but anyway, it's not as kind of condensed and thin or narrow as this one is, but it is still very, very fluffy and very flimsy. Well, kind of flimsy, so that I can blow out the color nicely. It won't look too harsh, but at the same time, because it is smaller and more condensed, I can be more precise with the color placement. As you go in with darker and darker shadows, you want to make sure that the darker you get, the more precise you are with the placement, because otherwise it will just kind of take over all the other shadows that you have laid down previously, and it will all start looking very, very muddy, very sloppy, and also it will probably be very difficult to blend out. I'm taking the shade butter, and I'm going to start dragging it in my crease as well. Well, in my case, above the crease, but what I'm following is the bone of my eye socket. So when you trace it with your finger, you can feel where the bone is, and I'm going directly underneath it, and you can kind of see where the most amount of pigment is. It's right underneath, but I'm also kind of blending it upwards ever so slightly. Now, the one thing you do want to be mindful of when you start applying eyeshadows on your eye is that you want to start from the outer corner and then moving inwards. Usually it, again, looks way more flattering to have more color on the outer corner than in the inner corner, because if you have a lot of pigment in the inner corner, like very, very dark shades, it will close the eye off, whereas lighter shades will open the eye up. I mean, if that's the look that you're going for, if you want to close the eye off a bit, then by all means put darker colors in the inner corner of your eye, but normally that's not what people want to go for, because it, as I said, it doesn't look the most flattering. Of course, if you're doing halo eyes or, well, spotlight eyes, then yes, you will be placing most likely darker shades in the inner corner and in the outer corner, but that creates this kind of balance because you have the darker shade in the inner corner and also in the outer corner. But if you only have the darker shades in the inner corner and then you're kind of blending out towards the outer V of your eye, then that would probably look very, very funny and emphasize the edge of your eye, which normally, I don't know, it would kind of look a bit off. Now, also, as you can see, while I'm building up the color, I keep my head kind of tilted backwards because that way my eyelid is all stretched out and even, so I can see where I am placing the color. If I were to do it like this, I would not be able to see where I'm actually placing the color because the color would go somewhere in the fold of my eye, and you know, that would be not as precise and just kind of working in the dark, so to say. Now, I'm also going to start taking the color into my outer V, so I'm dragging it closer to my lash line. Now, one more tip that you can be mindful of: if you have more close-set eyes, I would recommend using more lighter colors in the inner corners and maybe even not taking the transition colors and the darker colors all the way to the inner corner, because that will make your eyes look even more close-set. The lighter colors, as I already said, will make the eye appear bigger and kind of open up your eyes a bit. So having lighter colors in the inner corner will give the effect of your eyes kind of being further apart. And the same kind of principle applies to people who have very far set eyes. So if your eyes are kind of far apart, you can bring in the darker colors more towards your inner corner to make them oh my god, you can bring in darker shadows closer to your inner corner. So again, that will kind of close up the eye a bit or make them seem a bit more together. And once you have the color placed down, it's always good to go in with the previous brush and just fluff over the edges and make sure that the colors are nicely blending into one another. Now, next I want to go in with an even deeper, darker brown. So I'm taking the shade Mocha, which is a beautiful chocolatey brown, but it's that kind of warm chocolatey brown. This one I'm taking on a Wet n Wild P15 brush. If you have less lid space to work with, or if you're just kind of unsure of your makeup skills, then I would recommend going in with a smaller brush. So for instance, something like this would be very, very good. This is the Wet n Wild P10 brush, because the darker you go, the more condensed the brush should be, because you don't want to fluff it all around the eye, as I already said. So if you go in with something like this and then use a more fluffy brush to blend it out, it will be more likely that you will get the color placed in the location that you want it to, and that it won't end up all over your eyelid. But just because I'm lazy and I'm kind of in a bit of a time crunch, is that the word? I'm going in with this and I'm just going to do the look kind of 2-in-1, place the color and also blend it out. You want to, again, start off the look in the same place that we did with the previous colors, but also you kind of want to make sure that you're not taking the color as high up. But again, because of my eye shape, I cannot take it as low down. I still need to keep it on that visible part of my eye, so I am taking it maybe slightly higher than I would otherwise. Again, if you have more eyelid space or your eyes are just kind of more wide and bigger, then you can keep the dark shade on your actual eyelid. Or if you have less lid space than me, then you would just keep all the colors lower down. You wouldn't take them as high up. Once I have the most amount of pigment laid down, I'm going to start buffing it out slightly, kind of upwards and outwards, and also towards my outer V to create this depth in the outer corner. I'm building the color up in layers, so I'm taking very small amounts of eyeshadow at a time, placing it down and then blending it out. And also wherever you want the most pigmentation to be, you can pat the color in rather than blend it, because blending is always softening the shadow. Pressing or patting the color on the eyelid is always like packing the color on. I always like to flick my eyeshadow upwards to kind of elongate the eye and create that lifted effect. That is also something that you should be mindful of if you have kind of droopy eyes. You always want to flick the eyeshadow upwards to create the illusion of your eye being more lifted. And now you can always go back with the previous brush as well if you feel like the edges are maybe not as clean, and you can soften them and make the darker brown blend into the more lighter browns a bit easier this way. And then I just keep building up the brown until I'm happy with how it's looking like. Okay, so now it's time to move on to the eyelid, and for that I'm taking a beautiful shimmery shadow called Smoky But Natural. And it is also kind of browny, but it's almost like a rose gold. I'm taking it on my finger because that's how I like to apply shimmery shadows, unless I'm doing something very, very specific like a cut crease. I'm just placing the shadow on my eye with my finger because I feel like that way I get the full impact of the shadow. I'm going to just start patting it on the eye where I want to place it. I'm also softly pressing it in to that darker brown that we laid down, and also kind of meshing it in my crease a bit. But I'm not taking it too high up, because if I were to take that shimmery color up on the actual hood of my eye, having hooded eyelids, it will emphasize the hood even more and bring it kind of more forwards. And then I also like to go in with the previous brush and just make sure that I have enough pigmentation on the outer V, the shimmery shade wouldn't take over too much. I'm also going to take a teeny tiny bit of the shade Obsessed. Or was it Obsession? No, Obsessed. Yeah, it's this one. And it is also a very nice shimmery shade, also kind of rose goldish, but it's just a lot lighter. And that will emphasize the look even more. So I'm placing that in my inner corner. I don't want to overpower the bronzy shade that we put down, but it just kind of added that more awake look to my eye. Now, once I have my top lid pretty much done, I like to go in with the first initial brush that I used. I just like to kind of buff over everything one last time, and that will again ensure that all the colors are blending into one another very nicely. Moving on to the lower lash line. If you are not new on my channel, then you know that I normally try and get the lower lash line out of the way as quickly as possible. But most of the time you do not want to neglect the lower lash line, especially if you have something like this on the top lid. You absolutely can, because I mean, if you chuck on some mascara and add a bit of, I don't know, eyeliner or falsies or whatever, you would look very, very nice and done. But it kind of looks like there's something missing, and yeah, it's just nice to kind of bring that balance on the lower part of the eye as well. So I'm first going to take the shade Butter that we used in the crease as well. Now when you get to the lower lash line, you want to use smaller brushes because the area that you're working with is that much smaller as well. And again, you don't want to end up with eyeshadow on your cheeks. You do not want to place the color all over your eye area. So using small brushes, make sure that the color stays in the place where you want it to be. So I'm going to use this. This actually doesn't even have a name. I don't really know where this brush came from. I think it was like from Forever 21 years and years and years ago. But yeah, it does the job. So now I'm going to start stamping the color on my lower lash line. And I'm taking it all the way in. Taking a clean blending brush. This is the Urban Decay Vice dual-ended brush. I got this from the palette Vice 4, I believe. Now, next up, I'm taking the shade Mocha, and I'm going to use an even smaller brush. And I'm going to place that on my lower lash line, kind of in my lower lashes, because I want the darkest color to be closest to my waterline. It's pretty much the same principle as is the case with the top lid. You want the darker shades to be closer to the lash line, and the same thing goes for the lower lash line. I'm going to use the other end of that Vice brush. It is, I mean, it's not the smallest brush in the world, but I like that it is very, very good for packing on color, but it also kind of gives way, so it is nice for blending the shadow at the same time. Always make sure that you get rid of all the excess shadow on the brush, especially if you're working with darker colors, because you do not want to end up with a lot of fallouts on your face. And again, I'm starting off from the outermost part of my lower lash line, and I'm slowly working my way inwards. But with this look, I don't actually even want to take the color all the way to the inner corner. I kind of want to take it somewhere halfway, blending over with the more fluffy side. The eyes are nice and soft, but they are also defined. They have some dimension. That is roughly what the eyeshadows should look like. If you're doing a smoky eye, I mean, this is the most basic one, but you get the idea. Before we finish up the look with some mascara, some falsies, and a lip, I'm going to highlight the inner corner a bit more. I'm going to take the shade Beam, and this is a very, very blinding highlight. That's why I'm taking a very, very small pencil brush yet again, just because I want to keep it strictly in that inner corner. I don't want to blow out the color all over the place. Taking a bit of the shadow, I'm placing it into the inner corner only. And I'm also taking whatever's left on the brush ever so slightly underneath the arch of my brow. Now we are almost done with the eyes. All I want to do is I want to add a bit of nude eyeliner in my waterline as well. A nude eye pencil or a white eye pencil or anything like that in the waterline will create the effect of your eye looking even more awake and even more big. Okay, now I'm quickly going to curl my eyelashes, put on some mascara, put on a pair of falsies, and also apply some kind of lip. And then we will be all done with this video. And that was the video. If you want to see all the products that I used on my face, then you can check the description box. All the details will be listed there. Even though I feel like I have said those things so many times and maybe everyone already knows them, I still hope that some of you found some kind of pieces of information in this video, or some tips that maybe you didn't know before, or that you find useful in some shape or form. Thanks so much for watching this video and spending time with me, and I guess that's it. So yeah, if you have any more suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section as always, and if you enjoyed this video, then you already know what to do. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So yeah, that's it, and keeping it nice and short, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!